Megalithic structures. It seems that no matter how ancient, whenever we find the remains of civilization on Earth, we find some sort of giant man-made structure whose purposes are often a mystery. From what is currently the oldest discovered megalithic site known to archaeology called Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, to the Great Pyramids, to Stonehenge, the purposes of these megaliths may be lost to time. If nothing else, they are fascinating time capsules. They are beacons that shine through the ages, delivering to us an ancient message from our distant ancestors. We were here. Human hands created this. Megalithic structures are such a great indicator of past civilizations, in fact, that they have caused quite a stir in a place that one might not expect them to be found. Space. The explosion of modern astronomy and space exploration has led to over half a century of important data from satellites and incredible high-definition images being taken of places in our solar system that we never expected we would see in such stunning clarity. Some of these images were so clear, in fact, that they revealed things that we were unable to explain. On Mars and its moon Phobos, we observed megalithic structures that appeared to have been created by intelligent life. This is the story of the Phobos Monolith. Mars, our red planetary neighbor, has two moons, Deimos and Phobos, which were discovered on the 12th and 18th of August in 1877. Asaph Hall, the American astronomer who discovered them, named them after the Greek gods of fear, Phobos, and terror, Deimos. The names were uncanny, as over 100 years later, in 1989, Phobos would indeed be the subject of a controversy that led to a great deal of fear here on Earth. Another story for another time. However, their names made sense. In Greek mythology, Mars is known as Ares, the god of war. In the famous ancient Greek epic poem, the Iliad, Ares is said to have spawned fear and fright, Phobos and his brother Deimos. The origin of the twin moons of Mars is still shrouded in relative mystery. Astronomers have posited that they could have been captured asteroids as their density, mass spectrum composition, and albedo, a measurement of an object's solar radiation diffusion, are all consistent with main belt C and D type asteroids. However, to support the capture hypothesis, Mars would have to have a much denser atmosphere. And even though it is hypothesized that Mars once had a much denser atmosphere, the porous interior of Phobos would seem to discourage the idea that the moons of Mars were captured. It is more likely that the formation of these moons was similar to the formation of Earth's moon. At some point in the distant past of the solar system, Mars collided with another celestial body which was roughly 1/3 its mass. The object was destroyed and formed a debris ring around Mars that eventually led to the formation of 3 moons, the third and largest of which was too large to maintain in orbit and eventually crashed into the surface of Mars, leaving only Phobos and Deimos. It was only relatively recently in history that we were able to do real hands-on research on Mars, Phobos, and Deimos. 4 rovers have successfully landed on Mars, and 14 man-made satellites still orbit the red planet to this day. One such satellite is the Mars Global Surveyor. Launched in 1996, it took over 200,000 high-definition images of the surface of Mars, Phobos, and Deimos before contact with the satellite was lost in 2006. The Mars Global Surveyor is now a ghost satellite, floating without power in the orbit of Mars until 2047, when astronomers have predicted that it will fall out of orbit and crash to the Martian surface. Grieve not, however, for the MGS far exceeded its mission parameters. Originally intending to operate for just 2 Earth years, NASA extended the mission 3 times because it had such a high level of success. The satellite mapped the surface of the red planet, and it was the first to discover water ice there. However, arguably the most ground-shaking images provided by the Mars Global Surveyor were not of the Martian surface, but of the surface of Phobos. In 1998, during one of its passes around Mars, the Mars Global Surveyor was to rotate 180 degrees in orbit so that it could take high-definition images of the Martian moon. The images were truly incredible, providing what are still to this day some of the most clear and visually stunning images ever taken of Phobos. However, the Mars Global Surveyor images of Phobos were far more than just visually beautiful. One of the images depicted something that no one expected to see, something that should not have been on the surface of Phobos, something potentially created by intelligent beings. The following is the first image ever captured of what is now known as the Phobos Monolith. Roughly 85 meters across and almost 100 meters high, the monolith is a single upright column of rock protruding from the surface of Phobos. Located just outside of Stickney Crater, the giant crater iconic of Phobos, the monolith is visible in images from other satellites as well, such as these ones taken by the high-rise camera aboard the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter. The monolith's estimated height puts it close to the size of the Great Pyramid. It is shaped like a triangular column, and appears to have extremely precise and symmetrical dimensions. But what is the monolith? How did it get there? Its shape and size would seem to suggest that it was constructed. But how is that possible? Is it more possible that the structure is some sort of natural phenomenon? Another monolithic rock, much smaller, approximately 5 meters in width, is found on the surface of Mars. Due to the nature of the internet, this image is frequently circulated as an image of the Phobos monolith, adding to the thickening cloud of disinformation threatening to suffocate the subject. This rock does have an uncanny shape, reminiscent of alien megaliths from science fiction. However, it is almost definitely natural. Looking above the structure, there is a cliff which the rock assumedly broke from. Not all monoliths were constructed. Mistakenly, some have hypothesized that this barely megalithic rock is an example of how the Phobos monolith could have naturally formed, though obviously there is no rock face on Phobos for its monolith to have broken away from to support this misconception. There are some plausible hypotheses put forth by astronomers to explain the monolith, but none have yet been confirmed. The best suggestion so far that astronomers and geologists have come up with is that the monolith could possibly be a piece of impact ejecta. Frequently, celestial bodies are bombarded by meteorites, asteroids, and other pieces of space debris, leaving behind impact craters. Sometimes these craters are simple. The force of the impact scoops out material from the planet's surface, melting small amounts of material but leaving behind an iconic bowl-shaped crater. However, if the object exceeds a certain size and velocity, the impact can be so great that it melts most of the material in the impact surface. Some of the melted material is ejected from the crater and sprayed outward, but most of it will stay in the impact site, and when it cools, it leaves behind something called a complex crater. Complex craters often have raised centers because the weak melted material in the center of the crater attempts to return to gravitational stability. Imagine dropping a single drop of water into a small filled glass. The wave created in the water will travel to the outer edges of the glass, displacing water from the center, and then the equilibrium of the system will return to the center. The central peaks in the complex craters are the result of this equilibrium returning to the center, pushing material together and upward, and then cooling. However, it isn't hard to see one large inconsistency in the suggestion that the Phobos monolith is an impact crater. There is no basin surrounding the monolith. Similar structures have been found on Mars, but geologists don't know exactly what they are. They have speculated that these are in fact central peak impact craters which were buried and then re-exposed by erosion. However, no definitive conclusions have been reached. If the Phobos monolith is believed to be the peak of an impact crater, then it must have been buried in ejecta, possibly by dust transfer from Deimos, or by the formation of the Stickney crater. The area around the monolith is flat, and the craters found in the immediate vicinity show signs of very long periods of micrometeoroid erosion. In other words, these craters are very old. Many of the craters lie directly on top of what would have been the basin surrounding the monolith. This means that if the monolith was formed by an impact crater, it would since have been covered, and newer impacts would have formed newer craters on top of it. And then those craters would have since been eroded over extremely long geological timelines. This would mean that the monolith is extremely old, likely too old to estimate an age without physical testing. It might also mean that the monolith is much larger than it appears, like the tip of an iceberg, or the head of the buried Sphinx. There may yet be more to discover beneath the surface. Thankfully, there has been a great deal of attention paid to the Phobos monolith as of late, as a familiar face, none other than Buzz Aldrin, recently told the story of the monolith in a rather spectacular fashion on C-SPAN, an American television news network. His words echoed the words of the UFO and astronomical communities alike.
There's a monolith there, a very unusual structure on this little potato-shaped object that goes around Mars once in 7 hours. When people find out about that, they're going to say, who put that there? Who put that there?
When people find out about that, they're gonna say, who put that there? Who put that there? Who indeed? Is it possible that the Phobos Monolith was created by intelligent life? The possibility that there was once life on Mars still has not been ruled out. To the contrary, water has been found on the red planet. The Mars Curiosity rover has found evidence that neutral pH water once flowed on Mars, a staggering 4 billion years ago. And furthermore, that period of habitability on Mars could have lasted for hundreds of millions of years. Could Mars have supported life when Earth was still in its infant stages? Could that life have been capable of reaching the stars and constructing a megalithic structure on their moon? If so, then why? Maybe the structure did have a purpose, but like many of the megalithic structures on Earth, it was lost to time. An ancient Martian research facility? Or perhaps it was created for no other purpose than to say to the universe, we were here. Martian hands created this. Until we conduct more physical experiments on the mysterious structure, we may never know. Thank you for watching and listening.